I'm so excited to welcome this episode's guest, Anna Corinne. She's been in my ear for the past couple of weeks as the host of Wild Geese Podcast, and some of my favorite episodes are Girlhood, Shame, Self Optimization with Haley Noker, and her most recent episode about your own sense of agency and how life changes when you realize the rules are made up. So, Anna, thank you for coming on. And would you tell us a bit about yourself, what you do, what you enjoy talking about on your podcast, and why you enjoy it?
Hi. Yes, of course I can. Well, I'm Anna. Like you said, I'm the podcast host of Wild Geese. I like to talk a lot about creativity, the inner workings of how creativity makes our brains spin, especially right now with algorithms taking over our lives a little bit. Um, I don't know. I feel like I talk about a very wide range of topics, but a lot of it is kind of philosophical. I started as a podcast producer for other people. So basically, I just listened to a lot of other people's podcasts for a very long time before getting the courage to kind of step out of that shadow artist era, I guess you can call it. Um, so I'm trying to help other people do the same, I think.
Yeah, and you're starting to vlog now too, right?
Yes, I'm dipping my toes in vlogging. We'll see if that ever becomes public, but yes. I took my vlogging camera to Cape May, what was that last weekend? The weekend before last, and I realized how much you actually have to get, like, how many shots you actually have to get to have a full vlog. Like, when people have a 30-minute vlog, that is so many shots. I did not realize that, so we'll
Yeah, and usually
see.
they edit it down from like hours of footage into 30 minutes of the best clips, and that's like also insane that you need to get that much footage.
Yeah, I got, like, 2 hours of footage and then edited it down to about 9 minutes.
Well, today we'll stick with podcasting and this video call and not vlogging. So, for this episode, I've been kind of reflecting a lot on my past relationships and trust and friendships. And I kind of view myself as someone with kind of trust issues. So it's kind of hard for me to trust new people. And if I view someone doing something as actions that create a bit of distrust, I find it really hard to forgive them and trust them again. So I'd like to discuss forgiveness in the context of relationships and the importance of building trust. So most definitions I found online are that are unrelated to faith say that forgiveness is to cease to feel resentment against an offender. So I think it's important to figure out what resentment is, what forgiveness is, um, and also I was reading a bit from the University of New Hampshire. They have a section on their psychological and counseling service page about resentment and forgiveness. And a couple things they list as a reason for holding resentment is illusion of power and control, providing energy and impetus to get things done, um, ways to avoid uncomfortable communication, provoking guilt in others, and trying to stay in the role of playing the victim. So, the one of the things, resentment being the impetus to getting things done, really stood out to me, and it reminded me of something you wrote. Spite doesn't sustain the evolution; it just lights the fire. And this is in one of your pieces of writing. It was like "Turn on the big light," I think. Um, so, with that being said, what does forgiveness mean to you? And do you think we can ever truly forgive someone?
Oh my gosh, such big questions. Yes, I do think that we can forgive someone. I don't think that forgiveness means that you necessarily need to get back to the same state that the relationship was in before, but I do believe in cycles of repair. Um, I think forgiveness for me means allowing that cycle of repair to exist and play itself out without what you were talking about before, or maybe not without it, but moving through that feeling of like trying to hold on to power. I think, especially in romantic relationships, but relationships at large, such a big piece of it is that power dynamic and trying to feel like you can come out on top in some way. And a lot of the times, feeling a sense of forgiveness is allowing yourself to release that a little bit, I think. Yeah, because you're just not always gonna come out on quote unquote on top. And does that mean that you can still move on, you know? Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
so do you think, like, naturally as humans, we tend to try and hold on to that competition in between people when we interact with them, we try to be, um do you think it's a question of being better or being in the right?
I think when feelings of pain come up, for sure. So like what you were talking about before of like when there is a rupture in trust, I think that's when we start to cling to trying to hold on to our power in the situation. Whether it's being like kind of doubling down on like, you hurt me, you need to fix this, you need to fix this, instead of being able to turn it around on ourselves and say, this person hurt me. And maybe that actually doesn't have anything to do with me. And maybe the way to get out of that feeling of hurt is not punishing them. Like, I feel like a lot of the times boundaries, which I do believe in boundaries, but boundaries can be very carceral and can be like, you hurt me, so I will never speak to you again. How dare you? I am a victim. Um, and at the end of the day, if you look at it, it's like you get on the other side of that. And did that actually help you? Sometimes, maybe, like there's no black and white way to look at forgiveness and moving through relationships. There will be relationships where setting a hard line in the sand and a hard boundary is what you're going to need to do in order to get that sense of peace and forgiveness and move on. But other times it's softer than that. And it's realizing that punishing the other person is not going to make you necessarily feel better.
Yeah, yeah, but that's a difficult thing to do in itself, isn't it? Like, I think back to when, there are moments in my life where I felt like resentment was the spark that lit the fire and I did something good with it. But in order to get to that place, I feel like it took me like a lot of time and self-reflection and just time in itself and sitting with the issue or something. I'm thinking of specifically like when I was studying abroad in the UK. I also made a previous episode about this. I experienced a bunch of racism, and it would just be like people on the street as well, like saying stuff to me, because I was Asian. And at first, I felt so defeated. I felt powerless, and I hated being there. But then after a while, I got so angry that I eventually, made an episode about it, and then that episode kind of catalyzed a lot of things with my university, so I ended up being able to, uh, be a speaker on a panel, and then other opportunities came from it. And that's what I'm thinking of when I think of this resentment being the spark that lights the fire into something bigger and better. But it took me a long time, and it wasn't something that I think in hindsight was fair on me either, or on anyone else going through that. So, what is something that you think do you have an experience like that you can share? If not, that's fine too. And how do you get from that anger to that initial spark?
Yeah, I love this topic. I think that um anger, first of all, I'm really sorry to hear that that happened. That is a terrible
Thank you.
experience to go through. Um but I have looked at anger over my life as something that is an enemy and then changed my relationship with anger as I've grown. I actually think that anger is a part of me that cares about me the most because it can spot those injustices and prompt me to act. Whereas sadness kind of puts you right in your bed and you're just gonna like sit there and cry about it. And that's fine too. Like all emotions are great and we should
Mhm.
give ourselves the agency to feel all of them fully. But what anger does is what you're pointing to, which is becomes a catalyst towards changing something. What you're feeling is the fact that something is happening that is not right and needs to be changed. So it can be that like thing that lights the fire, like I said. Um, but sometimes you do have to like sit with that wave of emotion. Like maybe it doesn't start at that spark of anger or resentment that gets you to move. Maybe it starts as extreme sadness, extreme discomfort, some sort of pain. Um, and it's kind of this process of like alchemizing your emotions to get you somewhere else. And in order to alchemize your emotions to get somewhere else, you have to be really okay with whatever it is right now, which feels kind of antithetical. Um, but yeah, I don't
What do you
know
mean
why.
by sorry, let me interrupt for 1 second. What do you mean by, alchemize your emotions?
So kind of what I'm talking about of like sitting with an emotion and allowing the emotion to be what it is and fully feeling it where it is will change it. It's not going to stay one static thing. That's not ever how emotions work. But I think that the more that we try to push down and deny our emotions, the larger and larger it becomes, the more amplified it becomes. So it might be something where it's like it starts as a seed of resentment, and the seed is pretty small, but you're not allowing yourself to fully face and express that seed of resentment. So that seed of resentment gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it's an explosive form of anger that's not helpful to
Mhm,
you
mhm.
and what you're trying to get done. Versus alchemizing your emotions would be seeing the seed of resentment and allowing the seed of resentment to be there and facing the seed of, oh my gosh, I can't talk. And facing the seed of resentment, and talking about the seed of resentment, you know? And by doing that, by looking it square in the face, it becomes something else because then it's interacting not only with you, but with the people around you. And you're able to like move through to whatever's on the other side.
Wow, that's a perspective I haven't really thought about. Because I think a lot of the times when I do have that seed of resentment, I kind of let it fester and grow into something huge that I can't really manage, um, and it's not really, navigatable? Is that a word?
Yeah. I get you.
Um, so do you think well, again, pulling it back to you, what's kind of like, uh is there an anecdote you can share about, like, the role of resentment in your life?
Yeah, totally. Growing up, my nickname was Firestarter because
I love that.
not because I was literally starting fires. I was not doing that, but I did not. I went like straight to explosive anger a lot of the times, and that's I was just a child that didn't have emotional regulation skills. That's not that crazy. Um, But I think when you start to identify with your emotions in that way, they can very easily start to take over your life, you know? And I can just remember so many times growing up when I was the girl who was throwing a big tantrum and people were kind of pointing at me like I was crazy in a way. And I think over the years and in the relationships that I've been in, I've tried to, like, tamper down and hide that part of myself in the past of, like, I'm a chill girl. I don't have any anger. I'm so chill." And the more that I try to pretend to be that person that doesn't have that inside of me, um, the more it like I was saying before, becomes this randomly explosive thing instead of this thing that you can move through
Right,
in a
right.
more productive way. And I think it's just been a product of like growing up and becoming aware of the fact that all of these emotions are not something to one identify your entire like personhood around, but also not something to tamp down and think like I'm crazy if I feel this. As soon as you say like I'm crazy because I felt resentment, you're just not allowing yourself to be a human being with a full range of emotions, and then again, it just goes off the rails.
Yeah.
So yeah, now I just feel like I'm a person who in the moment, if something rubs me the wrong way, I'm able to speak it as soon as it happens and allow it to be what it is. Instead of that thing you do where someone says something that you're like, "Hmm, that didn't sit right." But you're like, "I need to be so chill, so I won't tell them that that didn't sit right with me. I'll just be the chill girl." And then it happens again and again and again, and then there's a blow up. Like, there's a difference between those 2 reactions.
There really is, and that really hits close to home. I see myself doing that a lot as well, where and I think also one thing to acknowledge with being did you say the nickname was Firestarter?
Yeah.
Being a fire starter is that you have that really strong sense of right and wrong, and you're able to see injustice, and when you see it, it bothers you. So I think that's a really valuable thing to have. Um,
Yeah.
it's a really good thing to have as a person, and it's sort of I think a lot of factors come together, especially as a woman, when you do speak up about something that is bothering you, like an injustice that you see and witness, and people tell you that or you get the label that you're crazy, or you're deeping things too much, or you're reading too much into things. Um, so I think it's really important to notice that and sort of kind of, figure out when you're getting angry over something and you're telling yourself that you're being crazy, that maybe you're not, and maybe you're just being reasonable and you see right and wrong more than other
Yeah.
people do sometimes.
Yeah, and I mean, this is systemic, right? Like, the idea of a hysterical woman is something that used to be like a medical condition as people saw it. Like, people genuinely saw hysterical as like a fully scientifically backed idea. And that wasn't that long ago. So we're still, as a society, trying to untangle and unlearn our understanding of women's emotions in real time. So I think it's really important to be able to spot those sort of dynamics because it's also not something you should just automatically blame on yourself. Like, oh, I I thought I was crazy. I was the fire starter. I was whatever. It's like, no, the entire world around you told you that that's who you are.
Mhm,
Uh,
mhm.
and then having to go through the process of redefining who you are outside of what everyone else is saying is big.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Have you ever, like, in a relationship, romantic or friendships or with family, like, have you ever had something happen and you thought, "I can never forgive this. This is so unforgivable, like, this person, I could never trust them the same again," and having that change over time, did has that ever happened to you?
Um, yeah, I think that when I have had those moments, when I have thought, I can never forgive this, this will never be the same, I have been right to some degree. Not that I could never forgive them. I do think that I have been able to forgive the people that have wronged me in the past or whatever. But I do think that when you get that level of feeling about something, the relationship will shift. because it is a natural thing for you to self-protect to some degree. Like, the reason why we're feeling all of these emotions is a self-protection mechanism that we should pay attention to. So just because you forgive someone doesn't mean that you need to, like, fully invite them back into your life, you know? I've had relationships with men who have done things like ghost out of nowhere and then come back 3 months later, and it's like, I I can tell you, like, "I forgive you," whatever, but
Mm.
that does not mean that you're invited back into my life after doing something like that. Um, like, I don't have to keep the feeling of resentment and anger and all of that with me because that does nothing for me and for my life. That does not improve my life in any way. So I can release that, and that's forgiveness, but that doesn't mean that they're then given the keys back into my life. But I've definitely had smaller ruptures. That's just like a part of relationships is to have smaller ruptures where it's like, "Oh, that hurt. Oh, I didn't like that." And going through the cycle of repair and forgiving them and them being in my life all the time. That happens constantly. But you just kind of
Mhm.
have to ask yourself like what's the magnitude of that?
Right, right. So, yeah, that's a really kind of crucial part, and it kinda is aligning with one of the questions I did have, which is how do you tell when something is, like, setting a boundary versus you're just holding a grudge?
That's a great question. I think that setting a boundary, I heard someone say that they like to think of boundaries more as like contingencies. So things that you're speaking about before anything even happens, of like, hey, these are the things that I do to take care of myself. And
So it's, like, preemptive.
yeah. And just to let you know, if this happens, this is how I will react. So that they're going into whatever uh, situation, action, whatever they're doing with the information that they need to know, like they know how to take care of you. And if they decide not to take care of you, they are an autonomous human being that is not under no obligation to do that. But then it's up to you to decide how to move forward. And like you said, holding a grudge is not fair to that other person. Like, you know that you're holding a grudge when it's just like things like the silent treatment are like a really big indicator of holding a grudge. I have been very bad about this in like past relationships. Like back when I was a teenager, I was such a big silent treatment girl. Loved silent
It
treatment.
was the go-to.
But loved it. But what I was doing was unfair to the other person. It was a lack of communication
Mhm.
and holding a grudge and just kind of like locking us in a weird relational dance that was not good for either person. Whereas setting a boundary, like I said, is preemptive. They know how to take care of you. And then if they don't, then you've told them what your reaction will to that will be. Um, and, like, it's not always so perfect. Sometimes something will happen and you'll be like, "Hey, this is a boundary that I, like, didn't really realize that I had, but I do have it. Here it is." Um, and then you have to take their reaction to that at face value. You know, like, if they come back and say, "Oh, well, you're crazy for that," I don't think staying in that and holding a grudge is good for anybody. That's when the, like, walking away type of boundary starts to happen. But if they're receptive, then holding a grudge is not like either way, holding a grudge is not gonna help you. I don't know if that really,
Yeah.
like, answered your question,
No,
but
it is at a certain point, it becomes simple, like, holding a grudge is not it.
yeah.
Um, and when, when I found myself exploring, like, maybe new relationships, I've kind of gotten really frustrated with myself because I've also dealt with, like, people who've ghosted me or, like, things where I've trusted someone and then, um, they didn't, like, break my trust in a huge way, but I placed some faith in them as a person, and then it didn't follow through, um, and I find myself reluctant to open up in new relationships. I remember very vividly, like, kind of this last thing that happened was I told this person, "Look, I need time because, like, I don't wanna come off as I'm not interested in you. I just need a lot of time to trust." And then this person was like, "Oh, yeah, don't worry, we have all the time in the world." And then later on, they did exactly what I was afraid of happening. Um, so what do you have to say to people, and maybe you have the same experience where you get really frustrated with yourself initially, like, why can't I just be normal and there's this amazing person, I just need to open up to them. But then on the flip side, you're like, "But I was right these times, and I'm just protecting myself."
Yeah. I think, first of all, just being aware, like, the more that you go through situations like that, the more that you're, like, dating, whatever, you'll just realize that everyone has their own protection mechanisms, and sometimes your protection mechanism clashes with someone else's protection mechanism. Um, like, coming into the beginning of relationships with this understanding that everyone's so scared. Like, everyone is so scared. Um, and, like, I definitely don't have, like, a cut and dry, "This is how to approach it." I think that in the past, I was very anxious, and I don't know really how I feel about, like, attachment styles and whatever. I think that we sometimes veer into, like, moralizing, "Oh, he's avoidant. He's such a bad person because he's avoidant." I don't love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but it is good to kind of be aware of what your reaction is to those feelings of fear that come up, and it seems like you are very self-aware of that. Um, I think that I've always come at the beginning of relationships, even with that real fear that's there, with this understanding that it would have been better to have loved and lost than to have never opened myself up to love at all. Um, and, like, I've been made a fool by many people in my life, and I'm okay, Like, I think that that's something to always remind yourself of when you are in that state of, like, "I'm scared and I need time." First of all, that's okay, and the right person will allow you to have the amount of time that you need. Um, but when you are in that state, understanding, "Hey, yeah, this person might respond to me in the way that I am afraid that they are going to respond to me. They might ghost me like the last person. They might say that I'm crazy. They might whatever it is. They might do that, and I have always taken care of myself when that has happened. I have always come out of it on the other side a better version of myself than I was before.
Your
I am the
allegiance
one that
is to
takes
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the one that takes care of myself. I'm not putting the onus on this other person to be that for me. If they do, that's great, but even when they do, I still have to show up for myself, because I've also been on the other side of it of, like, someone is loving me in all the ways that I need them to, and if I then lean on them completely to give me the love that I need and start to forget about giving it to myself, then when life changes or anything happens, you then have to, like, reteach yourself how to show up, you know?
Yeah, ultimately, you just have yourself if things go south, and
Yeah,
that's the crucial bit.
yeah. Which I know, like, can feel sort of, like, not what people wanna hear, but I think it's such a liberating thing to know. Like, that really is the thing that's the most grounded when you're in those first few stages with somebody. You're getting excited about someone, but you're also freaked out and you're also like, "Hey, give me time. I don't know if I can do this. I was hurt before." All of those things are coming up. The most grounding and liberating thing to continually call yourself back to is like, hey, I do remember, yes, last time that that person hurt me, that really sucked, but also it brought me back to myself, to a new degree. Um, and if that happens again, that's great.
Yeah, I love that, and it's always a learning curve as well because you learn not through the person that hurt you, but through the hurt itself, you kind of discover yourself in new ways as well that you didn't know being in that state of naivety, because you weren't pushed to explore those sides of yourself, and I feel like also you as you go through it, you gain more confidence in yourself as well because you're like, "Wow, I am resilient. I can get through that. So I
Totally.
can basically do anything." Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, genuinely, I have had the most profound moments of confidence and just like evolution of the self after my worst breakups. Which again, I know that that's like never what anybody wants to hear when they're happy or whatever in their relationships. But genuinely, sometimes I look back at times that I was moving through heartbreak and I'm just the most in awe of that girl more than any time that I've been, in love and thriving and whatever. Those moments, like, moving through that and then having that girl and being like, "I know that I am that person that can carry myself through that." And not only carry myself through that, but have a lot of fun doing it. Like, you're listening to new music in different ways than you were never listening to it before. You're hearing
That's
lyrics,
so real.
like
Yeah.
yeah, there's, like, a depth to your awareness in life. So
Yeah,
good.
yeah. You definitely gain a new perspective, um,
Yeah,
and that just ultimately makes you more well-rounded. I feel like you just and the thing with the songs that you said, I think it makes you relate to a broader spectrum of people that have gone through hardships as well, and you come out the other end more understanding ultimately as well.
yeah, totally.
But
But also just,
yeah.
like sorry.
No, no, go ahead.
Um Also, just what we were talking about before about, like, anger, resentment, all of that. My ability to move through hard emotions, I feel like has really been honed through moving through heartbreak. Um, Without those experiences, I would still be the eight-year-old girl who's blowing up over nothing, and everyone around me would be like, "Who is this chick? What's going on?" Um But because of the level of, like, self-awareness and lessons and things like that that come through heartbreak, I am a different person that I like more, you know?
Yeah, and you can have that, sense of, like, "Yeah, I did that. I'm proud of myself for that." And that just boosts your self-esteem as well.
Totally.
Well, I think that is a great place to, sort of conclude this episode on this lighter note of things. 'Cause we did explore, some darker things
Right.
initially, but thank you so much for coming on, and I'm sure my listeners will really enjoy this episode and getting to know you a bit. Um, yeah, do you have any final thoughts you wanna add?
No, thank you so much for having me. I guess my final thought is just, like, don't be so afraid of heartbreak that you don't allow yourself to feel love.
There we go, you heard it first, guys.
Woo.